This is The Guardian.
I'm Bridie Jabour, coming to you from Gadigal land, and this is Who Cared? The disappearance of Amber Haigh.
A Supreme Court murder trial has begun for a New South Wales couple in the Riverina, accused of murdering a 19-year-old woman who lived with them. Robert and Anne Geeves have pleaded not guilty to killing Amber Haigh 2 decades after her disappearance.
In Wagga Wagga Court 4, Robert and Anne Geeves are accused of murdering Amber, a teenager who had an intellectual disability and a son to Robert. The prosecution alleged that the Geeves had planned to use her as a surrogate mother and take her baby.
The Crown claiming Robert and Anne killed Amber in order to take custody of a 5-month-old child.
Which the defence says is simply untrue.
Anne's defence lawyer adding Anne's only concern was to look after the child that Robert had brought into their own relationship, whether she was happy about that or not. She did not kill Haigh, and nor did she stand by as her husband killed her.
This week, the court heard for the first time prosecution witness testimony about what has been referred to as the tying up evidence, the subject of some arguments in court.
At the beginning of this trial, we heard from Amber Haigh's mother, her great aunt, people who'd known her a whole life, people who'd watched her grow up. The witnesses we heard from this week were people who had only fleeting contact with Amber Haigh, some of them who met her only once, others who came into contact with Amber Haigh in a professional capacity as a nurse or a counsellor, people who drove her to appointments. What we got from these witnesses, from these glimpses of Amber Haigh's personality, was of a naive young woman facing extraordinarily difficult challenges, and of a young woman confused about her place in the world and looking for security and for stability and for love, and being unable to find it.
Amber Haigh disappeared more than 2 decades ago in 2002. The trial for her murder is now in its 3rd week. It's Monday, the 8th of July.
It's Monday and court has risen. We spent a significant part of the day in closed court, where court's emptied of the public and members of the media. Anyone not directly involved in the case is out of the room for legal argument. We don't obviously know what's said in those moments in closed court, but it's critical for the passage of this trial. We heard from a couple of witnesses in the afternoon, again building a picture of Amber Haigh as a young woman finding her way in the world. Someone who they described as kind-hearted and helpful, but one who could also be headstrong at times.
Ben, we've finished week 3 of this trial now. How did we start the week?
It's been a very big week. We've heard from 11 witnesses, but the first major development came very early in the week, and we saw significant legal argument between the defence and the prosecution, presided over by the judge, and this is over what's being known as the tying up evidence.
And what is the tying up evidence?
At its heart, this evidence is about disclosures Amber Haigh is alleged by some witnesses to have made to them about her relationship with Robert Geeves. The accounts differ slightly. There's some variation in what she said, but she's alleged to have told a number of people in her life, people she was very close to, like her grandmother, to relatives, to neighbours, and to people she'd only just met. It's alleged Amber told these people that Robert Geeves used to bring alcohol to her flat. They would drink until Amber was drunk, then he would tie her up and have sex with her. For a number of hours, the court heard legal argument about the admissibility of this evidence. The legal arguments around whether this is evidence that the judge should allow to be presented in this trial. The defence has argued that the probative value, what weight this evidence has in proving these allegations, is very low. It can't be tested because Amber Haigh is not alive to be cross-examined about what she's alleged to have said. And the defence argues that against this low probative value, this evidence is unfairly prejudicial against Robert and Anne Geeves. They say because of that, the balancing of this low value of the evidence against the prejudice to the Geeveses, it simply shouldn't be admitted. But the prosecution argued that these are very serious allegations, that Amber's alleged to have made disclosures to lots of people, to friends, to neighbours, to her grandmother, to a woman she just met on a train station. And that has to lend weight to its reliability as evidence, that she repeatedly gave this consistent or very similar version of events to a number of different people on separate occasions. Now, the judge in this case, Justice Julia Lonergan, on Tuesday she made her first ruling in regards to one witness's evidence about tying up allegations. And in the case of this one particular evidence, she ruled in favour of the prosecution, saying it wasn't unfairly prejudicial to Robert or Anne Geeves for the court to hear this. Though this is the first, importantly in this trial, we're expecting several more witnesses to go to this issue, to give this sort of evidence in this trial. And the judge will consider each witness's evidence individually and to rule on its admissibility. But on Tuesday afternoon, she did say from the bench, Amber made so many cries for help in different guises. It's almost distressing. And made them to all sorts of people. People who could help her. People who wanted to help her. People who didn't help her.
Right, so the judge did rule in favour of the prosecution. What then came of that?
The judge ruled in favour for one witness, and that witness then came forward onto the stand, a woman by the name of Patrina Ingram. She's a prosecution witness, and she told the court she only met Amber Haigh a single time, this chance encounter at the train station in Cootamundra. We're talking about a period in time where Amber is a new young mother. She's living between three houses, between the Geeves' property, between her great aunts and between a flat in Young, none of which, the court has heard, are really appropriate for her and for a baby. She's also seeking to travel with her baby to go and see family in Sydney. Amber's going to Sydney with her son, and Patrina's going the other way. She's going back to the family farm. It's March of 2002. They both arrive at this train station and there are no trains going either direction. And they're stranded here for 2 or 3 hours. So they get talking. They decide to go for lunch. They share an ice cream. And they start talking about their lives. And, of course, Patrina Ingram asks about Amber's young baby. And Patrina Ingram told the Supreme Court Amber was clearly besotted with her son, absolutely besotted with her. And during this conversation, Ingram tells the court that she compliments Haigh. It's either on the pram or the blanket that she has for the baby. She can't remember which it is. And she says that Haigh replies almost casually that it was a gift from the wife of the father of the child. And Ingram tells the court she was stunned. She says, I was shocked by that comment. I said, what, does she know about the baby? And Ingram says Amber starts to talk about her relationship with Robert Geeves and the nature of her relationship with Robert and his wife, Anne. And in Ingram's words, she told me that both the husband and wife would come to her place in Young, that they would bring alcohol with them. They would all drink the alcohol until Amber Haigh, was drunk, and then the wife would go home and that the husband would tie her to the bed and have sex with her. Ingram tells the court she's shocked by this. She keeps a diary in 2002 and she writes about this in her diary that night. She also tells her partner at the time, so there's these contemporaneous accounts. She's since lost the diary. But Ingram says that 3 months later, in June of 2002, she's watching the news when a picture of Amber Haigh comes up and the report says she's missing, and it's asking for people with more information to come forward. And Ingram told the court this week she rang Crime Stoppers to report her meeting with Amber Haigh, and included in that, Haigh's alleged disclosure to her that Robert Geeves would tie her up and have sex with her. Ingram said she was told a detective would call her back, but she said she never got a phone call. Ingram said she called Crime Stoppers twice more in the years that followed, including once in 2008 when she saw another news items about Haigh's disappearance. But she told the court she never received a call back. Ingram said she was finally telephoned in 2024, 22 years after Amber Haigh went missing, by Senior Constable Amanda Carey, who's a homicide detective who'd been reassigned to the case. Under cross-examination, Patrina Ingram agreed she was disappointed police hadn't called sooner. It's Tuesday afternoon. One of the things that's been an issue at this trial, and will continue to be an issue at this trial, is the quality of people's memories and the evidence they give. People are relying here on memories from 22 years ago. But Patrina Ingram's a different witness. She's younger. She was a young woman about Amber Haig's age, and she only ever met Amber Haigh once. She was in the witness box this week and was impressively articulate in telling the court the details of their alleged conversation, what they talked about, Amber Haig's mood and appearance and demeanour, and the things that she allegedly told her, particularly about the nature of her relationship with Robert and Anne Geeves. Ingram was able to recall in acute detail almost everything about that day she spent with Amber Haigh.
We'll be right back. Okay, so you've heard the tying up evidence and then you heard the testimony of Patrina Ingram. What else did you hear this week during the trial?
The other major witness was a child and family nurse who worked in Young by the name of Sue Powell. She's another prosecution witness. She was called on Wednesday and she only left the witness box on Thursday afternoon. She's given extensive evidence. Now, Powell worked at the Young Community Health Centre and told the court that she first met Amber the day after Amber's son was born, in January of 2002. And in particular this week, she was taken to case notes that she made in 2002 about her interactions with Haigh and with other government agencies looking after Amber. She was taken in particular to one day, which was the 5th of February 2002, described as a day of high drama by one of the defence counsel. On this day, on 5 February 2002, her son is about a fortnight old. And at this time, Amber is staying between 3 locations, none of which, the court heard, are particularly appropriate for her or safe for her son. She's staying at her Aunt Stella's house in Kingsvale, but also the Geeves house, which is next door in Kingsvale. And she's got a flat in Clark Street in Young. She's moving between those. And on this day, Amber has an appointment with Sue Powell and they've arranged to meet at her flat in Young. Sue Powell tells the court that she goes to the flat, but Amber's not there. And in Sue Powell's notes, she says, neighbour stated that Amber had called on the telephone and said, they won't let me come into town, they being the Geeves. And Sue Powell's written in her notes, it sounded like Amber was being held against her will. So Powell says she calls police who go to the Geeves house and they collect Amber Haigh and they take her back to her great aunt's neighbouring house. Sue Powell goes to that house and she tells the court that what she finds there distresses her enormously. She says that she arrives in the middle of a huge domestic dispute. She says she didn't know exactly who was fighting. It's not necessarily violent. There was a lot of yelling and screaming going on in the kitchen, and it's about Amber's presence in the house with Robert Geeves's baby. I found Amber in her bedroom holding the baby. She looked terrified. I decided I couldn't leave her in that house with that domestic violence happening. So Sue Powell tells the court she removes Amber from that house and takes her to the flat in Young. And her contemporaneous notes record, Amber greatly relieved to be away from the fighting, which she said had been happening every time family members visited, which was most days.
So Sue says that she got Amber to the flat, and then what does she tell the court?
The court heard that later in February, Haigh called Powell asking if she could return to the Geeves home. And Powell gave evidence that she told Haigh ultimately it was her choice where she chose to live, but that in her professional opinion, in Powell's professional opinion, it was safer for her and her baby to stay at her flat in town. And Powell was taken to that opinion in court. She was asked why she held that opinion, and she told the court, I strongly felt that she was being taken advantage of. I felt that this was an arranged pregnancy. Powell gave evidence that Amber often appeared anxious and could be quite defensive if she felt she was being interrogated. And Powell told the court, and I quote, if we asked too much about what was going on in the Geeves house, she was frightened. Powell said Amber told her during a meeting about her baby's health and his ongoing care, Robert decides this, or Robert decides that. She said the commonest comment I heard was, Robert wouldn't like that. Powell told the court she had repeated contact with police about Amber Haigh and her welfare and the welfare of her baby, as well as with the Department of Community Services and Disability Services.
So Sue Powell was on the stand for 2 days. What happened during the cross-examination?
The cross-examination of Sue Powell was conducted largely by Michael King, who's acting for Anne Geeves. He spent a lot of time on this idea that town gossip, wild rumour and speculation, innuendo, fuelled a lot of what people thought about the Geeves. In her evidence in chief, Powell told the court what she'd been told about Robert Geeves. She said, when the case came to us, there were quite a few people that gave me information within community health. She said it wasn't favourable. I need to note here that what this unfavourable information is hasn't been made clear in court. It's not something that's been pursued in great detail at this point in the trial. But whatever this information was that was allegedly given to Sue Powell, she said it made me more diligent in what I wrote in my notes, in how I approached everything I did with this case. Sue Powell emphasised to the court that her priority was the welfare of Amber Haigh and of her baby. Now, in King's cross-examination, he returns to this. And he talks about what Sue says she was told by a police officer in town. And Sue Powell told the court the police officer said to her, Robert Geeves had a very big police file, and that the same officer had been to the Geeves house where Amber was often staying and said it was a pigsty. The police officer told Powell, you should be concerned. In King's cross-examination, he asked Sue Powell, he says, you weren't shy about expressing your opinions to Amber that she shouldn't be living at the Geeves' house. And Powell says, I thought it was safer that she was out of the Geeves' house. And King asked her, and part of that was from things you'd heard from the police and things other people had told you. And Powell said, yes, that's right. Sue Powell was also questioned about what she then did with that information, who she passed that information to. She said she passed it to people within community health and to other people who had professional dealings with Amber Haigh. The court spent a number of hours talking about this reputational evidence, this information that's being passed around Robert Geeves and around concerns people had. And Defence Counsel flagged that this is going to be a significant part of their case, that much of what's alleged against Robert and Anne Geeves is based in rumour and innuendo. People who didn't like the Geeveses, people who were concerned about his past, and who then used that to see him in the worst possible light. We can see the beginnings of this in the cross-examination of Sue Powell. What did the police tell you about Robert Geeves and his very large police file? What did you tell other people about Robert Geeves and what you understood about his history?
So the court heard from a number of professional witnesses about Amber's mothering abilities. What was said?
There are these two contrasting faces of Amber Haigh's parenting that we've heard. On one hand, we've heard from multiple witnesses that Amber was besotted with her young son. She absolutely adored him and loved him dearly. A number of witnesses said they didn't believe Amber would ever leave her baby behind, as she's alleged to have done when she supposedly travelled to Sydney in June just before she disappeared. Amber is alleged to have said to a number of people she was worried about losing the baby, about the baby being taken from her. Because on the other hand, the court heard testimony that Amber really struggled with the fundamentals of being a mother. Sterilising bottles, where it's safe for a baby to sleep, all of those sorts of things Amber really struggled with. Sue Powell's notes record that Amber's parenting skills were inadequate, especially at night and around safety issues. And the court heard that a number of health professionals raised concerns that Amber would have difficulty managing by herself. Court rose early on Friday afternoon. This is going to be a long and complex trial, and we're still very much in the fundamental stages. We're still building a picture of Amber Haigh as a young woman and latterly as a new mother. Earlier in the trial, we heard from family members and neighbours. But this week has focused on health professionals, nurses, counsellors, people who encountered Amber in a professional setting. We heard about their efforts to support her, to protect her, and their growing concerns over her safety and that of her infant son.
That was Guardian Australia reporter Ben Doherty. If you missed our first episode, go back and listen. In it, we lay out the whole case the prosecution is trying to prove, and we heard from Amber's mother and other people who knew her well. You can find it in the full story feed. This episode was produced by Joe Koning, who also did the sound design. The executive producer is Miles Martignoni. I'm Bridie Jabour. We'll be back with another episode every Monday.